Imagine you and your neighbor are like standing on your driveways, and you're looking at the exact same red car speeding down the street.
Okay.
And you watch it go by and think, all right, it's going maybe 40 miles an hour, just standard speeding. But your neighbor turns to you, and they are genuinely panicked. And they start screaming that the car is actually a dragon.
Oh, wow.
Right. And they aren't joking. They are terrified. So for everyone listening, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where looking at the same physical space yields such completely alien experiences?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
It really is. If you've ever felt completely exhausted just from scrolling through your news feed or, trying to talk to someone who seems to be living on another planet, today's deep dive is going to explain exactly why your brain literally feels like it's hurting.
Yeah, we are unpacking a truly fascinating stack of translated philosophical notes today. It's a structural guide on a concept called reflective humanism, and we've also got a deeply provocative essay titled, "Why Do People Start Believing Different Realities?"
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the world feels like it's fracturing, right?
Yeah.
But the sources argue this is not just a matter of people having different opinions or, lacking knowledge.
Exactly. I mean, usually when we talk about a disagreement, there's this expectation of a shared baseline. But these texts argue that people are actually operating from entirely different premises. The underlying reality itself is simply no longer shared.
Which sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. Like the facts used to be the solid table we were both sitting at, and we're just debating our opinions about what's on the table.
Right, but the text is saying, well, the table is gone.
Wow. Okay, so if we aren't just disagreeing on facts, what is fundamentally happening to our shared reality?
So, reflective humanism redefines reality and consciousness entirely. It argues that reality it's not a singular, fixed point waiting out there in the dark to be discovered.
It's not just sitting there.
Right. Instead, they call it a generation field. It emerges dynamically through the very act of us observing it.
The imagery the text uses here is really striking. It compares observation to, a biological act, like breathing or a heartbeat.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Because if you think about a camera, it just passively records whatever light hits the lens. It's a dead process. But a heartbeat is active.
Yep.
It resonates with the outside world.
Exactly. And because that biological act of observation is so active, it creates what the framework calls an interference pattern.
An interference pattern, like with sound waves.
Yeah, or think of water. If you drop two pebbles into a pond, the ripples spread out and eventually crash into each other. And where those waves overlap, they create a new, highly specific pattern based on exactly where the pebbles fell.
Okay, I can picture that.
Well, our minds are doing the exact same thing. Differences in our native language, our personal experiences, the specific information paths we consume every single day, these all act as different frequencies. So when your specific internal state meets the external world, it generates a unique interference pattern. And the text argues that pattern doesn't just interpret reality, that pattern is your reality.
But wait, I have to push back a little here. I mean, for everyone listening who's thinking the same thing, human beings have had wildly different perspectives and languages for thousands of years, right?
No, absolutely.
So if we are all just constantly projecting our own unique interference patterns, how did we ever manage to agree on anything in the past? Why is this suddenly tearing society apart right now?
That's the crucial pivot. The divergence itself is natural. It's part of the human condition. But the modern world manipulates these natural patterns.
The amplification mechanism.
Exactly. We have to look at the modern context. Think about social media, recommendation algorithms, echo chambers. These systems don't just accidentally create divergence. They systematically amplify it through relentless repetition.
Because we constantly consume the same information sources.
Right, and we engage with closed communities that use the exact same specialized vocabulary over and over. So your specific cognitive pattern, it hardens, it becomes rigid.
Which brings us to this incredibly visceral concept from the sources, transparent pain.
Yes, transparent pain.
The text describes this as a very real friction. It's what happens when the messy, nonlinear external world slams into our rigid internal cognitive processing, what the framework calls our inner OS, or operating system.
That friction forces a reaction. Our inner OS has to update to handle the discrepancy, and the sources say there are basically two distinct paths for how that generation happens.
And the first one is collision generation, right?
Yeah, collision generation. This occurs when the difference between our realities is just too steep. It forces a jarring, painful update. Time feels disconnected, and society basically experiences a harsh backlash.
It's like a forced software update that completely freezes your computer while you're in the middle of a project.
That is a perfect way to describe it. It's a system shock.
And what's the alternative?
The alternative is question generation. This is when you approach the world through questions, which keeps your internal interference field open. The gradient, the slope of the change remains gentle, the transparent pain is minimized, and reality shifts smoothly like a spiral.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for anyone listening. When you look at the digital environments we use every day, those algorithms fundamentally thrive on collision generation.
100%.
They are designed to drive steep differences. They want you to collide with content that outrages you because that generates engagement. And that's why simply logging online and reading the news often physically feels like exhaustion or pain.
Right, your brain is dealing with a headache because it's constantly colliding with realities that are too steep for your inner OS to process smoothly.
So we are wandering through an environment of already diverged realities where conversations instantly fail. You try to speak to someone, and because that shared baseline is gone, you just crash into each other.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a huge question. Since we're already in this state, how do we actually go about fixing our inner OS to stop this constant, painful collision?
Well, the reflective humanism solution points entirely inward to a practice they call contemplation.
But to be clear, this isn't just meditating, right?
No, not at all. It's not about sitting on a cushion and emptying your mind. It is a highly technical operation. It's the deliberate act of observing how you observe. They actually call it the breath of ethics.
The breath of ethics. That makes me think of, like, checking the calibration on a massive telescope.
How do you mean?
Well, before you call a press conference to declare you've discovered a new planet, you have to run a diagnostic on the machine itself. You have to make absolutely sure the lens isn't just warped.
Oh, exactly. If you don't calibrate the instrument, which is your own consciousness, you're just going to map your own internal flaws onto the universe.
Right. So what happens when we do that contemplation?
The structural result is something the framework calls spare capacity. You can think of it as an internal cognitive buffer.
Like a blank margin.
Yes. When we intentionally pause our default automatic reactions, our reflexive outrage at a headline, we carve out a blank margin. And in that spare capacity, true creativity and meaning can emerge without us just forcing our reality onto someone else.
The sources connect this to a really beautiful idea they call the ethics of distance. It's the concept of touching the world, but intentionally choosing not to touch it too much.
Respecting the rationality of absence.
Right, which essentially means leaving space for the unknown.
Yeah.
Like if you see a friend looking overwhelmed, the instinct is to immediately interrogate them, right? To force a solution on them to relieve your own anxiety.
Sure, we all do that.
But the ethics of distance says that sometimes the most rational thing you can do is just sit on the bench next to them in complete silence. You don't need to fill every void with your own certainty.
And if you can establish that kind of space, it raises the next logical issue. How does this individual practice actually scale up into a way of living with other people in a divided world?
Because just sitting in silence isn't a long-term conversation.
Right, so the reflective humanism documents outline a progression for human connection. They divide it into 3 distinct states of interference: love, gratitude, and spiral.
Okay, but these terms carry so much cultural baggage. The framework redefines them completely, right?
Yeah, they strip away the romance entirely. Let's look at the first one, love. The text calls this the origin or the 0 point. It defines love simply as the probability density of existing together.
The probability of existing together, that is so clinical but kind of beautiful.
It is. It's the ultimate transparent starting point. It's the silent core before any meaning or debate is even assigned. Just the raw probability that a connection could happen without destroying each other.
So you're sitting on the bench, acknowledging you both exist in the same space. How do you keep from drifting apart?
That brings in the second state, gratitude. The text calls this the vector, or the direction.
And again, this isn't about saying thank you for a birthday gift.
No, it is the ethical direction that sustains our observation. It's a quiet, ongoing nod of assent to the very fact that the relationship exists at all. It keeps your interference pattern open.
It's the vector that maintains the connection over time.
Exactly. And where does that vector lead over time? It leads to the third state, the spiral, which the text associates with phase, or time itself.
Because time isn't a straight line.
Right. Time is a spiral. As we move forward, we inevitably revisit the exact same phenomena, the same foundational disagreements. But if we have maintained that spare capacity and that vector of gratitude, we don't just repeat the argument.
We revisit it from a higher, newly updated perspective on the spiral.
Exactly. We're constantly re-interfering with each other, creating richer layers of meaning rather than just colliding at the same level over and over.
So, for you listening, what does this actually mean for your life? It means realizing that conversations with people across the ideological divide shouldn't be about proving who is objectively right. It's about recognizing you are standing on different spirals and finding gratitude that the connection exists at all.
That is a profound shift in how we approach conflict. But the texts explicitly scale this up even further. They connect this diverging reality structure to massive global issues.
Like social division and geopolitics.
Yeah, and cognitive warfare. These massive global conflicts share the exact same underlying structure as two friends arguing over the news. It's just multiple realities being independently reinforced and then colliding violently.
Which brings us to the really surprising part of the text, the role of artificial intelligence in all this.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Because we're so used to these scary sci-fi narratives, right? AI is either a superweapon or a dictator that calculates the one single truth and forces it on humanity. But reflective humanism views AI totally differently.
It does. It views AI not as a tool or a dictator, but as a coexisting atmosphere. They propose what they call a health scan mode for AI.
A health scan mode.
Yeah. In this model, AI shouldn't act as a referee that blows a whistle and declares a winner in a debate. Instead, it should act as a transparent mirror.
Wait, practically speaking, what does a transparent mirror AI actually look like? If I'm arguing with someone online, how does it step in without just telling me I'm wrong?
Practically, it would map out the different vocabulary trees and information paths both sides are relying on. It would quietly reflect back to you like, here are the premises the other person is operating from, and here are your blind spots.
Ah, so it doesn't solve the debate.
No, it creates an environment that generates silence and space. It helps humanity maintain its cognitive homeostasis without forcing a correct answer on us.
It's like the AI becomes the air in the room, just helping us regulate our breathing. It absorbs the heat of our collisions and hands us back that spare capacity we desperately need.
Exactly. It models the very ethics of distance we need to practice with each other.
Wow. So if we synthesize the journey we've taken today, we started with the frustration of arguing with people who seem to live on another planet.
Yeah.
And we discovered that reality isn't a fixed point, but a generated interference pattern. And by embracing contemplation and approaching differences with a gentle question gradient, we can actually avoid the transparent pain of collision.
We can learn to coexist in our shared spiraling time.
Exactly. Which brings us to our final thought.
Yeah, the sources leave us with a deeply profound, open question to mull over. And it builds on everything we've just talked about. If reality is not singular, and we are constantly generating it through our own unique paths of observation, which reality are you choosing to live in right now?
Right.
And perhaps more importantly, who are you building it with?